900 years after the fall of the Second Fleet, the Krythan Imperial Archive still called it a victory. Archivist third rank Sella Morn had read the official account 11 times before she was assigned to catalog the recovered wreckage. 11 times, the text described a decisive engagement, a superior fleet asserting dominion over an insignificant outer colony, the matter closed within a single rotation. She had believed it the way every citizen of the Empire believed it, without weight, without question, because the archive did not lie. The archive corrected itself when new evidence emerged. It had never once needed to. The wreckage arrived on a transport barge 3 kilometers long, hauled out of the debris field surrounding a world the old records listed only as Designation 7 Requiem, a name assigned after the battle rather than before it. Sella walked the length of the barge's cargo hold with a data slate in one hand and a growing unease in the other, because nothing in the twisted hull sections matched what the official account had described. The Second Fleet had not simply won this engagement. Something here had fought back. She found the first anomaly in a command module recovered nearly intact. Its interior scorched, but its data core miraculously preserved beneath 3 meters of collapsed bulkhead. The core's logs were fragmentary, corrupted by 9 centuries of vacuum exposure, but what remained was enough to make her hands go still over the console. The final transmission recorded from the Second Fleet's flagship was not a declaration of victory. It was a request for reinforcement that never arrived, because there had been nothing left to send it to. Sella filed her preliminary report through standard channels, expecting the routine acknowledgement that met every archivist's minor correction. What she received instead was a summons to the Imperial Historical Office, delivered within 6 hours, faster than any bureaucratic process she had encountered in 11 years of service. She understood, walking the polished corridors toward that summons, that she had found something the Empire had spent 900 years working very hard not to find. The Historical Office occupied the highest tier of the archive spire, a chamber of dark stone and older silence, and the official who received her did not offer a seat. Director Kess Aldrin was old enough to remember the last 3 revisions of the Second Fleet's official account, and old enough to have written one of them himself, and he regarded Sella's data slate the way a man regards a wound he has spent decades pretending was healed. Your report claims the flagship's final transmission was a request for reinforcement, he said. The official record states the flagship's final transmission was a declaration of successful pacification. Explain the discrepancy, Archivist. I did not create the discrepancy, Director, Sella said. I recovered a data core with a 94% integrity rating, cross-verified against fleet registry codes that predate any revision this office has issued. The discrepancy already existed. I only found it. Aldrin's expression did not change, but something in the room's temperature seemed to drop regardless, the particular chill of an old lie being handled carelessly in front of someone too junior to understand what it cost to maintain. The account of Designation 7 Requiem has stood for 9 centuries, he said. It has been taught to every cadet who studies fleet history. It has been cited in 3 separate Imperial doctrines regarding engagement with unaligned colonies. You propose to overturn 900 years of established record on the basis of a single corrupted core. The core is not corrupted, Sella said. It is damaged. There is a difference, and the difference matters because a corrupted record cannot be trusted and a damaged one can still be read. I have read it, Director. I would like this office to read it as well before deciding what 900 years of established record is actually protecting. She had not expected the words to feel dangerous as she spoke them, but she watched Aldrin's face and understood they had landed as exactly that, a challenge disguised as a request, because in an empire built on the archive's infallibility, suggesting the archive had been wrong was not a small correction. It was an indictment of every director who had signed off on the account since, stretching back 900 years in an unbroken chain of institutional certainty that had never once been asked to bend. Aldrin did not dismiss her. That alone told Sella something had shifted, because a director secure in 900 years of settled history did not need to hesitate before dismissing a junior archivist's inconvenient discovery. Instead, he gestured for her to follow him deeper into the historical office, past 3 security checkpoints she had not known existed, into a vault that no standard Klee Rance level acknowledged on any organizational chart she had studied. "What I am about to show you has never left this room," Aldrin said, and his voice had lost the practiced weight of authority, replaced by something closer to exhaustion carried too long by too few people. "It has not left this room in 900 years because every director who inherited this vault made the same calculation I am about to make regarding you. Either you already know enough to be dangerous, or you know nothing and can still be protected. I do not believe you fall into the second category anymore." The vault held a single archive terminal, isolated from the Empire's networks entirely, and when Aldrin activated it, the record that appeared bore none of the polished formatting of the official account Sella had studied since childhood. It was raw fleet correspondence, unedited, time-stamped across the 11 days of the actual engagement at Designation 7 Requiem, and Sella understood within the first 3 lines that the battle she had been taught had lasted a single rotation had, in truth, lasted nearly 2 weeks. "The Second Fleet numbered 800 vessels when it arrived," Aldrin said. "The official account states losses of under 5%. The actual losses recorded here exceeded 91%. Designation 7 Requiem was not an insignificant outer colony archivist. It was a human settlement of fewer than 40,000 individuals, possessing no standing fleet, no orbital defense grid the Empire's own scouts had assessed as credible, and a technological baseline our own doctrine classified as pre-expansion." Sella stared at the numbers scrolling across the terminal 91%, 40,000 civilians, no standing fleet, and felt the particular vertigo of an entire worldview recalibrating in real time. "How?" she said, because it was the only word that fit the size of what she was trying to understand. "We do not fully know," Aldrin said. "That is the truth this vault has protected for 900 years, not a victory disguised as something smaller, but a defeat this empire has never been able to explain, delivered by a species we outnumbered 20 to 1 in every measurable category of military strength. The official record was not written to inflate a small win into a larger one. It was written because the truth was unbearable, and because an empire built on the certainty of its own superiority could not survive 900 years believing otherwise." Sella spent the following weeks with clearance she had never held, reading correspondence that rewrote 9 centuries of assumed history one document at a time. And the deeper she went, the less the human defenders of Designation 7 Requiem resembled the primitive colonists the official account had always implied. The fleet correspondence described something closer to desperation given structure. A settlement that had known annihilation was likely and had prepared for it anyway, not with superior technology, but with a defensive philosophy the Empire's own tacticians had never encountered and never fully reconstructed. "They did not fight us as a fleet," she read aloud from a surviving commander's log dated the 4th day of the engagement. "They fought us as a population. Every structure on that world's surface was a weapon or a decoy or both. Every civilian vessel we assessed as non-combatant carried munitions salvaged from equipment we had no record of them possessing. We destroyed their visible defenses within the first 30 hours. It made no difference. There were always more defenses we had not seen, because they had built this world to absorb a first strike and continue fighting regardless." Aldrin, reviewing the same documents beside her, looked older than his years allowed. "Our doctrine assumed a colony without standing fleet defenses was a colony without meaningful resistance capacity," he said. "Designation 7 Requiem disproved that assumption completely, and it did so at a cost that should have forced this empire to revise every subsequent engagement strategy involving unaligned human territory. Instead, the empire buried the lesson rather than learn it, because learning it required admitting the lesson existed." "What happened to the survivors?" Sella asked. Because the fleet correspondence described weeks of continued resistance but never described an ending. And she understood, asking the question, that she was asking Aldrin to confirm something he had clearly hoped she would not think to ask. Aldrin activated the vault's final sealed file. One Sella had not yet been shown, and the record that appeared was not military correspondence. It was a casualty assessment, dated 3 weeks after the engagement's official conclusion, and it stated in language so clinical it took Sella a moment to understand its meaning that the Second Fleet had not achieved pacification of Designation 7 Requiem. It had achieved withdrawal under negotia. TED terms because continuing the engagement risked losing what remained of the fleet entirely, and the terms of that withdrawal had never been made public in any form. Negotiated terms, Sella repeated, because the phrase did not fit anything she had been taught about how the Empire engaged unaligned worlds. The Empire did not negotiate with populations it classified as pre-expansion. The Empire pacified, absorbed, or withdrew entirely from territories deemed not worth the cost, and none of those categories accounted for a negotiated settlement with a colony of 40,000 civilians against a fleet of 800 Imperial vessels. The terms are recorded here, Aldrin said, and his voice had gone very quiet, the particular quiet of a man reading something he had read many times before and never stopped finding difficult. Designation 7 Requiem would not be occupied. It would not be required to submit tribute, technology, or territorial concession of any kind. In exchange, the fleet's remaining survivors, numbering fewer than 70 vessels, would be permitted to withdraw without further engagement, and the location of every remaining Second Fleet vessel would be transmitted to Imperial command rather than concealed or destroyed. They let us leave, Sella said, understanding arriving slowly in pieces too large to hold at once. They had won by every measure this record describes, and they let the survivors go rather than finish the engagement. They did more than let us go, Aldrin said. Read the final clause. Sella read it and felt the vertigo return, sharper this time. The final clause of the negotiated withdrawal stated that Designation 7 Requiem would provide medical assistance to any Second Fleet survivor requiring it before departure, extended without condition to combatant and non-combatant personnel alike. A provision that made no strategic sense for a population that had just survived 11 days of orbital bombardment from the fleet now receiving that assistance. It was not the record of an enemy securing victory. It was the record of a population that had won a war it never wanted to fight and had chosen, at the moment of total advantage, not to extract everything that advantage allowed. Why, Sella said, and Aldrin did not answer immediately, because the fleet correspondence that followed the withdrawal contained something closer to an answer than any official explanation the Empire had ever offered. A single transmission from the human negotiator, untranslated in the official record but preserved in full within the vault. And Sella read it twice before she understood why 900 years of directors had chosen to bury it rather than release it. We did not fight this war to become what we were fighting, the transmission read. You came to take something from us we were never going to give freely. We stopped you at a cost we will carry for generations, and we are choosing to end this the way we began it, defending what is ours rather than becoming what threatened it. Take your survivors home. Tell your empire what happened here, or tell them whatever story lets you sleep. We know the truth, that will have to be enough. Sella sat with the transmission for a long time before she spoke again, and when she did, her voice carried none of the careful procedural distance she had trained herself to maintain across 11 years of archival work. This is why the record was rewritten, she said. Not to hide a defeat, to hide what kind of defeat it was. An empire that loses to superior force can rebuild its doctrine around superior force. An empire that loses because the opponent chose mercy at the moment of total victory has no doctrine that survives that lesson intact. That is precisely the calculation every director before me made, Aldrin said. And it is the calculation I inherited without ever being permitted to challenge it, because challenging it meant admitting this empire's entire structure of superiority was built on a single buried exception it could never afford to acknowledge. If Designation 7 Requiem could stop the Second Fleet through defense and resolve rather than superior force, and could then choose restraint when restraint was not owed, what does that say about every subsequent engagement this empire justified through the same assumed superiority? Sella understood, sitting in that vault with 900 years of buried records spread across the terminal between them, that she had walked into an archival correction and found something closer to a reckoning, one that extended far beyond a single engagement and touched every doctrine, every certainty, every justification the Empire had built across 9 centuries of expansion. The question was no longer whether the official account of Designation 7 Requiem was wrong. It was what the Empire became once, that wrongness could no longer be contained within a single sealed vault. "Well, what happens now?" she asked, and Aldrin's silence in response was longer than any silence he had allowed since she had entered his office, because the answer was not one he could give alone, and both of them understood it. "Now," he said finally, "we decide whether this empire is capable of surviving its own history, or whether 900 years of certainty was always more important to preserve than 900 years of truth. I do not know which answer this office will choose when I bring your findings forward. I only know it cannot remain buried in this vault indefinitely, because you are not the first archivist to find the thread, Sella Morn. You are only the first one who refused to let it go once you found it." The revision was not announced with ceremony. It appeared 6 months later as a quiet amendment to the Imperial Historical Archive's public record, a single paragraph inserted into the account of Designation 7 Requiem noting that recovered wreckage analysis had revealed discrepancies in previously recorded casualty figures, under review by the Historical Office. It was not the full truth. It was not the negotiated terms, the human transmission, or the 91% losses the vault had concealed for 9 centuries. It was a crack, deliberately small, in a wall that had stood unquestioned since before either Sella or Aldrin had been born. Sella understood, reading the published amendment in her own quarters months after the vault's contents had first unmade everything she believed about the Empire's history, that this was not victory in any form the old fleet correspondents would have recognized. It was not restitution for 40,000 civilians who had defended a world with no standing fleet, and it was not acknowledgement of the mercy that transmission had offered at the moment it was least owed. It was a paragraph carefully worded, designed to be survivable rather than true. But it was also, she understood, the first crack in 900 years of certainty, and cracks did not close once they had been made. Somewhere beyond the Empire's borders, on a world the old records had reduced to a designation number rather than a name, the descendants of those 40,000 civilians carried a different memory of what had happened at their world, one that had never needed an archive's permission to be true. The Empire had spent 9 centuries rewriting its history to survive what it could not defeat. Sella closed the file and understood that even a rewritten history could not fully erase what had actually happened, only delay the moment someone finally read it correctly. She did not know if she would live to see the full record released. She suspected Aldrin did not either, and that the paragraph they had fought 6 months to secure was the only victory either of them would see in their lifetimes. It would have to be enough, the way it had been enough for a negotiator 900 years earlier, choosing to end a war on terms that cost her everything and demanded nothing more than being remembered honestly. Sella intended to keep being the archivist who remembered it that way, for as long as the Empire allowed her to.